Alright, so I wanted to do a quick video for you just about some of the stuff I meant to talk to you about in Missoula that we didn't get around to. And so the first one's going to be just on mechanics, and the second one's going to be kind of mechanics and a little bit of tactics. But so the first thing is, Craig at Arms and Armor showed me this, and then Roland Rosecca also showed me it when I got to train with him for the Asphalt Grand Opening. And it's the idea of the centers of rotation on a sword as opposed to point of balance, which frankly on a long sword is a in my opinion a pretty useless thing to know. It's not that important. You have two hands to support the sword, so how far out the point of balance isn't going to add a terribly significant torque on your wrist. So what I am looking at instead is the centers of rotation, which is the first one's right by the hilt. If you just kind of pinch it between two fingers and you move it around, you can see there's kind of a spot down here that everything kind of rotates around. That never really moves, no matter how far I move the sword over, and it's kind of the laziest part. And so I like to think of this as the laziness of the point, so that's going to affect how easy it is to put things, put points online and keep them online even as you move around. It's not, in my opinion, as important as the second center of rotation, which is the center of rotation for the cut, which is, again, if you kind of wiggle the sword around, there's this spot here that doesn't really move, or doesn't move as fast. And so when you look at a lot of the guards like Posta di Donna, you know, it's illustrated way swept back like this, which feels kind of awkward at first, but what Fuhrer is really doing there, in my opinion, is setting the center of rotation for cutting directly on his shoulder, because what happens is the less you can move that, the faster and more direct that center of cutting rotation's path is, the faster the cut's going to be, and then it will incidentally leave you better supported in the bind, and with your hands low, which we know from most of the images that a lot of Fuhrer's binds occur with the hands relatively low, and it also brings your sword into parrying position before you launch out to complete the cut, which is really useful for not getting hand sniped, counterattacked, and even just not getting stuck in the bind in a disadvantageous position. I'm not sure that's even a word. So yeah, I used to think that cutting optimization was all about getting my hands out as directly as possible. Tend to take a lot of hits on the arms when you do that, on either side really. You don't have great protection, your hands come out high, they stay high, your bind is going to be really strong a lot of the times, and your point's going to be pretty easy to keep off target unless you're at really far range. And you have to be at basically max extension to get your point online. So I don't think that works that well, and I've been trying to move away from it. And then the other thing I used to think, and sometimes still do think about, is you know, if the tip of your sword were connected to their chest with like a string, and you just moved the tip as fast as you could. And that's a fast cut, but it runs into a lot of the same issues with gaining the crossing in a safe manner that the hand straight out does. So instead, like I've said, I've been trying to optimize the path of just that center of rotation. So it kind of slings off my shoulder almost. And those to do that, I've got to move basically down to my hip first, which is great, keeps your arms close, gets you into essentially a pretty structurally stable parrying position before your cut even completes. So it's a nice place to be halfway into your cut if they're going to countercut or anything. Also, interestingly enough, this closed position is essentially the crossing we see if you're in the Stratomaster. So it's one thing that can end up happening is if you get stuffed early, well then you're just going to be at range for stretto instead of largo, and you just have to make that decision when it comes to it. So it moves kind of down, and then you'll notice the center of rotation is still going straight, tip comes across. And so it's kind of a deceptive cut, because it doesn't look like I'm cutting, really. It's very fast. You can hear the tanakazi, the sword wind there. It's easy to keep it supported on that fendente line. It's easy to stop and break with your wrists and leave the point on line and thrust in. Puts your center of rotation in a good spot to work around, so you can do this second play quickly. Really, really handy. Or first master of largo, whatever. Yeah, so I've been looking at that.